we'll move on and talk about Tottenham Hotspur. Now, Paul, Tottenham are in poor form, as we discussed earlier on in this
That's
program.
it. Have we moved on enough? Is that section finished now?
Change the subject.
Well, the question is, are reinforcements, Paul, needed in the summer across the pitch? How are you feeling about that going into the summer transfer window? Which positions do you think need to be targeted for Tottenham?
We spoke about it before. It's the back four defensively, Van der Ven and Romero, the cover that they need. Dragusin's come in. We've not really seen much of him due to the fact that they've actually stayed fit. Van der Ven's injury record and Romero's injury record and suspension, we know they're not going to play a full season. Joe Rodon's at Leeds. They'll look to make that a permanent. Eric Dyer's at Bayern Munich. Neither of those two will be integrated back into the side. And the fullback areas as well. I think they struggled with Ben Davies at left back when they played against Arsenal. Bukayo Saka playing on that right-hand side caused them a lot of problems. So when Udogie and Porro are not fit, the strength and depth that they've got in those areas, Emerson Royal, for as well as he's done this season, and he's been a makeshift centre-half, I think they'll be looking to move him on. But the manager needs to rejuvenate the squad and do what he wants to do. He's been given the opportunity. There's been enough there this season to suggest that the future is going to be good under Ange Postecoglou, and you need to let him get the players in that he wants. Played at Manchester City with 4 fullbacks across the back four, so that's obviously an area of glaring need. Whether they need a number 9 or not, it's always been the case when Harry Kane's at the club as who plays when Harry Kane's not fit, and they still haven't resolved that problem. You know, they've got Richarlison, he's not done it, he's not got the figures. They've got wide players who can play as a 9. Sonny does a great job there, and he scored the goals this season, and he's carried the can as a number 9. But he's not. He's a lot better player on the left-hand side, cutting in on his right foot and causing teams problems coming in off that left-hand side. So there's an argument: do they actually need a number 9? Do they need that replacement for Harry Kane? The squad does need looking at. It does need strengthening this summer. But recent results: the loss against Liverpool, the loss against Arsenal, Chelsea, Newcastle. Yes, they're disappointing, but I think it's the amount of goals that they've conceded and the manner of those defeats was the most worrying thing. But actually, the thing for me with Tottenham is its peaks and troughs over the season. It's not just one specific problem that they've had all season. It's they play well in spells and then they have an awful spell. And that's what's happened to them. You spread these results out over the course of a season, actually challenging for a Champions League place, looking like they're going to get a Europa League place with a new manager and losing Harry Kane at the start of the season would be deemed as a great season. But it's just the way that they've lost games and the amount of clusters that they've lost these games that it's been a problem. And it's highlighted areas in the squad that have needed strengthening.
Paul, quick question. Obviously, being a former goalkeeper, what's your opinion on Vicario? Obviously, he's coming for a bit of criticism recently of conceding so many goals from set pieces. Do you think he is the right man to be Tottenham's number 1 going into next season and ahead?
I think he struggled in the second half of the season. I was and am a big fan of him. I thought he started the season really well. Makes great saves, makes great decisions. His depth perception is fantastic because with the defence playing such a high line, he has to read the game so well, and he's very, very good at that. But Manchester City came to the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium in January in the FA Cup, and they highlighted the problem with Spurs and set plays. Now, it's not just the goalkeeper, but Spurs have been targeted for the second half of the season. You look at the first half of the season, the goals conceded from corners, I think it was maybe 3 or 4. I don't know the stats off the top of my head. I've got it written down in the Bible here somewhere in the football journal for the season, but I can't go through it and find it all now. But actually, what they conceded before that Manchester City goal, what they've conceded after is 3-4 times more goals because City highlighted that problem. And Vicario has been part of that problem. He gets involved too much at times when they put attackers around him, like the Arsenal game that was highlighted when Ben White was stood around him. And he's far too interested about the impact of the players around him than concentrating on the ball, what's coming in. Sometimes you have to put a defender between you and the opposition. I don't think he's been helped by his defence. Yeah, managers can work on set plays all week, but actually when players cross that white line, they've got to have leaders, they've got to take responsibility, and they've got to defend their own box. But to your original question, Vicario, yes, I think he's good enough, but I think this is an area of his game that's been flagged up as a weakness and something that he has worked on that he's going to need to continue working on, because you know what teams are like in the Premier League. When they get that little sniff of an inkling of a weakness, they'll try and highlight it every week.
Pete, following that, I mean, are there any names or players that we can talk about potentially that could be targeted going into the summer? We know that one name that's been linked quite heavily is Ivan Toney. Is there any validity to that? Could we see Toney making the move from West London to North London potentially this summer?
Yeah, I think there's potential that deal could happen. A lot will depend on Spurs and what the transfer fee they can get to meet Brentford's valuation. They're obviously looking around £50 million for Ivan Toney. I think he'd be a great answer to Tottenham's striking problems. He scored goals for Brentford at a high level, and I think in that Tottenham team, when you've got the likes of Son, Maddison, Brennan Johnson, Kulusevski providing you the ammunition, I would expect him to score even more in the Tottenham team. And it's not just his goals; it's his overall build-up play, hold-up. He's a big, strong number 9, and again has sort of similar characteristics to what Harry Kane used to do. He can come short, or he can go and play up against the centre back as well. So for me, he would be perfect for Tottenham, and it does look like interest from other clubs has cooled in Ivan Toney, so they're not going to have maybe competition from the likes of Arsenal and Chelsea, who were previously linked with Ivan Toney as well. So maybe that opens the path clear for Tottenham to make a move for Ivan Toney. So yeah, I think for me, number 9 is definitely a position. We've talked previously that maybe another central midfielder and a centre back is needed for Tottenham, and then Paul's mentioned there probably cover at fullbacks, or if they can find players to improve at fullbacks as well. I think they'll definitely look at that this summer as well. So yeah, I'd expect a number of ins and outs of Tottenham this year. You look at some of those players that they probably could sell. Paul's mentioned about Emerson Royale. I think they'll definitely be open to offers for him. Richarlison, question marks over him. His numbers just don't add up for me. He hasn't been consistent enough for Tottenham. He's not the answer if you're looking at a regular goal scorer. So they could maybe be open to offers for him. And then you've got other players like Joe Rodon out on loan. That deal will probably become permanent. Sergio Reguilón's been out in 2 loans this season, so he doesn't figure in the plans. Lo Celso being a bit part player this season. They could maybe get a decent fee for him if he's to be sold in summer. And then you've got Brian Hill. Then other players like out on loan, Jed Spence doesn't look like he's got a future. Tanganga, who's done quite well at Millwall, another one you could potentially sell off, and Ndombele as well over in Turkey and Galatasaray. He's not going to get back into this Tottenham side right now. So I think Ange Postecoglou will be willing to let most of those players go if it boosts his own transfer kitty, so he can go out and make signings he feels can improve the squad.
When you list it like that, Pete, that's actually quite alarming, isn't it? I mean, for the want of a better phrase, there's a lot of dead wood that the manager's got to get out of that dressing room. Not necessarily dead wood because of the way that they play or their futures in football, but their futures at Tottenham. There's a lot of players there that you talk about that are on loan or not involved that the manager is going to have to shift on.
And Paul, is it exciting in any way to know that potentially there will be some sales there that then means some reinvestment? Is that then encouraging, do you think, for the squad?
Yeah, absolutely. Of course it is. I think that Ange's got enough of a relationship now with the supporters and the trust there. But I think the big thing for Tottenham is Paratici's involvement still. We know that he's got the suspension in European football, but actually the relationship that he's got with the club and the way that he is with Daniel Levy, working in whatever capacity that he's allowed to. You look at the players that in recent history that Spurs have brought in, they've only made the team and the squad better. Kulusevski and Bentancur, for example, in the winter window. And then you look at Vicario and Van der Ven. I mean, they weren't on that many people's radars. And you look at those type of signings and you look at the players that Ange's going to want, the conversations that Ange's going to have had with Paratici, with Daniel Levy. You would expect the type of players that come into the Tottenham side to be exciting ones.
You've just watched a segment from Football Insider's brand new podcast, The Inside Track, with me, Lewis Pearce, alongside the guests on the show. Thanks very much for tuning in. Please do give the video a like, comment your thoughts on the topic, and feel free to share on your social media pages. If you want to listen to the full podcast episode, click the link in the description below. Keep your eyes peeled for plenty more content and exclusives here on The Inside Track.